Tony and Tony Iommi and Sabbath, what they created and the influence that it has is completely global. You know, I can't name one band that hasn't been touched by that in some way, but especially the metal bands. And they will all tip their hat to Black Sabbath as being a massive influence, because that's where it comes from.
Anyone who's been in a metal band since 1980 and on has stolen from Black Sabbath. I mean, years later, to me, he was like, well, if the devil looked like somebody, it would look like that, who will then murder you with his guitar riffs.
Long dark hair, mustache, black clothes, black guitar, crosses. It's fucking heavy.
What Tony created was like a whole style. The music, the look, the danger, the excitement is still cool today.
It's different for me because once you get to know somebody, you separate the myth from the man. The word that comes to mind is extraordinary.
A lot of my family relations played instruments, drums and piano and a lot of accordions, really, being Italian. My father played accordion and harmonica. They were always they were very poor and most of the time out working, you know. So I didn't really hear my dad play much, very rare really. He'd pick up the accordion and play. But that was basically my first instrument, because being in the family, I started to learn to play it. First of all, I wanted to be a drummer, but it was too noisy, so I got listening to different music. I got attracted to the guitar. Well, it was more rock and roll then I used to listen to, because that was on the radio, but it would sort of be Chuck Berry stuff or Buddy Holly or somebody like that. What really appealed to me later was the instrumental stuff by the Shadows, who were probably the biggest instrumental band in England at the time. Cliff Richard was a singer and then they used to back him, but they also did instrumentals, which for me was great because I could try and learn the instrumentals. It was something to learn. So I used to listen, wait for the radio, and then do the top 20 countdown and wait till they come on and tape them, and then try and learn to play them.
Birmingham, long known as the workshop of the world, is a city forged in steel, smoke and sweat. Rising from the Midlands, the skyline is marked not by glittering towers, but by factory chimneys. Yet beneath the grit lies a sense of pride and endurance. Here, amid the smoke and the steel, the working man's spirit holds firm, unyielding, resilient, and forever tied to the industrial heartbeat of England.
The city was okay, I mean, but there weren't a lot of nightlife as such to do in them days. But the area where we lived was called Aston, and it was a fairly rough area. It was nothing to do really, apart from fight. It was a tough city. It's equivalent to Detroit, I suppose, with all the manufacturing and cars and stuff. It was difficult, really, because there was a lot of gangs and stuff around. So if you weren't in a gang, it was a bit difficult, And I didn't want to particularly be in a gang. So the music side of it sort of really helped me get away from that.
I was born in '51. I think the country was still kind of getting its act together in terms of growth and development. So young people were just given no opportunities. We just never, there was no consideration, There was nothing for anybody to do, so you were just loose on the streets in that respect. And so, joining a gang, all part of the hard as nails environment. But it was very, very tough. You got to remember as well, the UK, and we're coming out of the Second World War. I think just the fact that we didn't see any opportunities as younger people just made it very, very frustrating and made you bitter. You just felt as though nobody cared about you. And so you can imagine the frustration that builds in a younger person.
Growing up in Birmingham, pretty multi-layered for me. I'm from a council estate, which is sort of East Birmingham, you know, not that far from the whole area where like Ozzy was from, like Aston. I mean, Birmingham is, as you could hear the factories at night, you know, which is obviously ingrained in a lot of us who make this form of, you know, essentially sort of subversive music, I guess. You know, like Priest, Sabbath, Godfather, Napalm Death, you know, this Birmingham thing, it's inescapably a product of its environment. I couldn't imagine being in a rural environment and having birthed this music, you know.
Yeah, I was in a factory, and strangely enough, I'd given my notice in to leave because I was going to turn professional with a band, go to Europe. So I'd auditioned with this band, they liked me, and I was about to get ready to go away, which would have been the first time for me, you know, and I was really excited about it. I went to work on the morning, and I used to do welding, electric welding and gas welding in the factory. And the one day this person didn't come in who used to send me the metal down, and I'd weld it. And they said, you've got to go on the machine yourself because there's nobody else to do it. Oh, God. So they put me on this big, huge, giant guillotine press. So as I'm pushing the metal through into the press, the machine came down on my hand. And the action of pulling my hand back quick, I pulled the ends of the fingers off. I mean, that was it then for me. I thought, oh, God. I just couldn't believe it, you know, the last day. And before that, I went home for lunch, and I said to my mother, I'm not going to go in this afternoon because, you know, you go back and you finish off the job properly. So, oh God, so I went back, and that's what happened.
Before hearing Sabbath, I saw them. I remember seeing Ozzy, and I remember seeing Tony, and I remember seeing that mad mouth and that mad mustache, and learning that this guy has no fingers. You know what I mean? Those were the first stories I heard. That's what I was told as a kid. It was almost like I grew up in a guitar shop, and it was like, ooh, Tony Iommi's got no fingers. Yet he's one of the craziest guitar players because he used to work in industry, and he got the tops of his fingers cut off. And here's a crazy story. I remember a Download festival. It used to be Monsters of Rock. I was about 11. And I remember someone telling me that Tony Iommi was over there. And I, without hesitation, ran up to him. And I need to see if I can find this photo because Tony doesn't know this. I've never told him this, so I'm telling him now that I ran up to him as an 11-year-old. And the first thing I did I took his left hand, or his right hand, and I looked at his fingers to see if they were there, and he chuckled at me, and he took a photo of me. And what's cool as a kid, when you see someone as a superhero, and you see someone as like your Batman or whatever, and then you hear a song goes, I'll never forget it. It sounded like a horror movie with this sinister voice that sounds like Dracula or some shit, you know what I mean? When you think like, you watch those old black and white movies and there's like Dracula or Frankenstein, and then Ozzy represents that vocally. I just think there was no limit to where they wanted to go because they were just four lads naively creating music that ended up being pivotal to rock as a genre. You know what I mean? In its beginnings of a new avenue. You know, I think like when we talk about what they did and what they achieved now, it's all in hindsight. They invented metal. It came from Birmingham. It came from the steelworks. It came from the industrial city that was Birmingham. But the coolest thing, in my opinion, about Sabbath, it was rooted in the blues, and it was rooted in instinct, and it was rooted in naivety. Blues music was dark. It was an act of rebellion. People forget that. It was an act of defiance. And, you know, you could either dance to it or you could cry to it. You could either dance to it or you could fight to it and mourn to it and live to it. You know what I'm saying? I think there was a million different branches on the tree of the blues that turned into rock music. You know, it turned into like pop music like the Beatles, it turned into rock and roll music like the Rolling Stones, or it turned into metal. And that was Black Sabbath.
The firm where I worked, the manager of the firm came round to my house to see how I was, and he said, I brought you an EP around, will you play it? I went, oh no. I said, I don't want to listen to music now. I was really depressed. The last thing I wanted to do was listen to a guitar player. He said, no, he said, put it on, and it's interesting, the story. And he told me about what had happened to Django Reinhardt, and I put it on, and I couldn't believe it. I thought, you know, it was just great. You know, when I was first introduced to listening to his stuff, I couldn't believe it, because I liked bluesy stuff and jazz. And when I heard his gypsy jazz, it was really brilliant. And especially having lost the use of two fingers. It was just amazing. I'd try, you know, listen to it a lot, and because I could relate to that after me doing the same sort of thing, you know, damaging two fingers. And it really inspired me to get to learn to play more by, you know, the use of, by doing something with my fingers. So I made these sort of tips for them, and so I could play. I can't remember an exact time, but it was, I did, while the bandages were on, I was trying to learn to play with my two fingers. I went to see various specialists, and they said, you might as well pack up, you're never going to be able to play, which was really depressing. But I wouldn't accept that. I went back and I started to make my own tips. It was trial and error, so over a period, it took a while. You know, I was trying different things where I could use, and now I'd just keep them on my fingers, and then I made something out of plastic and it would just slip off. So I had to come up with putting material on so it'd grip the string and wouldn't rip it. And I used leather in the end. I tried different things, and leather worked the best. And that's, I think, what made me sort of come up with the sort of Black Sabbath thing, the sound, because trying to make the sound bigger to fill in for the full chords that I couldn't play anymore.
Well, you know, it's very hard to be completely original in music because we're all influenced by something, otherwise we wouldn't exist. I don't know where Tony's stuff came from though, I really don't. He starts doing this riffy stuff and it's very dark. There's a sort of point in music where people want to be kind of angry and heavy on guitars. You know, Jimmy Page is there, Led Zeppelin. Jeff Beck's been there with the Truth album. It's gluey and dark and deep, and Tony does all this sort of stuff. A lot of fifths in the way he plays, a lot of sustain, but a lot of this chug thing, this choke thing. And Tony kind of brought the whole spectrum of what you could do with those low strings of a guitar together into one package. And it was completely original. And it took people a long time to admit that Black Sabbath were totally original.
What comes to mind when I think of Tony Iommi, I think the greatest riff writer of all time. It is a catalog of riffs unlike anyone in history. How, from the simplest notes, like I took some guitar lessons when I was younger and asked them to teach me Black Sabbath songs, and my guitar teacher was kind of snooty because of the simplicity of Sweet Leaf or whatever. He sort of poo-pooed it, and he's like, well, you could probably figure it. I'm like, dude, you don't understand greatness. And one of the things about Black Sabbath is it helped me to like have confidence in my own opinions about music. Because there were people that were far more advanced players who disliked that band. And I said, you just don't understand what's great about it. Like I'm in the tribe on this one and you just don't get it. And that has influenced the DNA of Tony Iommi is in every riff that I've ever written.
I think it goes back to his simplicity again, because you're mentioning players that you talk about Hendrix, and it's like, he definitely had his hand in, what heavy metal started out as. I don't think he would think that. I don't know if he would. I think he was more of a blues man, When you talk about Eddie and you talk about, Jimmy Page, they all had their other strengths, but I just see Tony as this direct line to what we consider heavy music nowadays, because he was so consistent and his tone was always like memorable and recognizable. But it's all about the riff within the song
Actually, the first time I heard them, I remember going to the mall with my mom, and she was like, "Oh, you can get a record, right?" So I got We Sold Our Souls for Rock and Roll. So I ended up putting this thing on, and I was just beyond terrified. The running joke I always say is like, I put it on, I was Catholic when I put it on. Then by the time I got midway through the album, I became a full-blown Satanist. And then at the end of the record, I converted back to Catholicism just so I could thank God for creating Black Sabbath. So, you know, it's just like he actually created an art form. So, I mean, you know, so it's just like we're all employed because of this one guy. I'm just saying that he created this style of music. You know, I mean, obviously with Geezer, Bill, and Oz. But I mean, it's just, you know, his riff writing. You know, it's truly mind-blowing. I mean, it really is its own art form. You know, so, but it's just, yeah, his legacy, it's lights out.
As much as anybody can be original in the world of music or rock music or anything, they were the first. And I always call him, he's the godfather of heavy metal, which he is. You know, find someone else who could wear that crown. Tony began all that stuff, and it's colossal. Everyone will tell you, all around the world now, people who play heavy music, metal music, whatever they want to call it, thrash music, it's influenced by Tony. He's there in everybody.
Ozzy used to be at the same school as me. He was only a year younger than me. We never really associated at school because, you know, you always sort of knock about with a couple of your own friends out the same year. So he was in a different year, so we never sort of associated with him. And when I was in a band with Bill Ward up in Carlisle, with Mythology, when we broke up, we came back to Birmingham, and we decided that we wanted to stick together and form a band. And one day, we went into the music shop in Birmingham, and there was an advert saying, Ozzy Zig requires gig. And I said to Bill, I know an Ozzy, but it can't be him. He can't sing. I didn't even think he could sing or anything, you know. I'd never heard him. So anyway, sure enough, we go round to his house, followed the advert, and knocked on the door. His mum came to the door, and we said, we'll come about the advert, and she said, oh, John, it's for you. And I'm seeing him walk up the hall. I said to Bill, forget it. And he went, why was I'll tell you later. So anyway, we talked to him for a bit, and then we left and never made any decisions or anything. And then 2 days later, Ozzy came round to my house, because I lived not that far from where he lived. We all lived in the same sort of area. So he came round with Geezer to my house. And we had a shop, my mother and father had a shop at that point. And so they came round and said, do you know any drummers? Oh God, I said, well, yeah, Bill was a drummer, and Bill said, I'm not doing anything. He said, oh, unless we all go together. So we decided to get together and give it a go. And what a row it was. I mean, it was absolutely horrible. Because me and Bill, the band we were playing before, we really got sort of tight and really, you know, used to everybody. But then when we got with Geezer and Ozzy, Geezer had never played the bass before. He was a guitar player, really. And it was a shamble. But it's amazing how we're stuck with it, and it came together really quick, you know. We started getting these gigs from an agent that Bill and myself knew up towards Scotland. And I'd be on the phone saying, and she's going, you do play top 20 stuff, don't you? Oh yeah, we play top 20. We didn't, it was all 12-bar blues stuff. And she went, okay, I'll give you a go, then you can come up, do 3 days up here, and you know. We went up and we died of death. It was, so some guy came up to us, and Ozzy standing there, and the guy went, your singer's crap. And Ozzy went, it was so funny, you know. But that was all part of learning, really, and it made us work together and work harder. So it, you know, it became into, we were virtually living with each other all the time, and it developed into what it did. Well, it was a bit of each, I think, because the first, obviously because of the music, because of Black Sabbath and the sort of songs we were doing, the first album cover was a woman on the front with a black cloak on, and inside the cover was an inverted cross. So that sort of, as you can imagine, opened a complete can of worms in 1969. So that was basically a bit of the record, you know, a lot of the record company because of the imagery they put out, because nobody really had seen us. And then, of course, they'd see us, and because of what we played, it was scary music to them, which was really what we were trying to create, because in those days, Geezer and myself used to go and watch a lot of horror movies, and we loved them. A midnight horror movie, you know. And I thought it'd be great to do music like, you know, to have a music like this horror, create the same vibe as a horror film would do then. And that was sort of what we did. I got back from, because we were in America, I got back from America, and I'd done an interview with, at my home with Melody Maker. They said, oh, you know, you're playing heavy metal. I went, heavy metal, what's that? They went, oh, well, that's what you're playing. I went, no, we're heavy rock. He went, no, you're heavy metal. I said, well, we call it heavy rock, you call it heavy metal, we'll call it what you like, but we're heavy rock. And I wouldn't accept the heavy metal thing for years. And, you know, of course, eventually you had to, because it probably was, you know, that's what people describe the music as.